This conference will now be recorded.
Go ahead, Brett.
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, I thought I saw you raising your hand. Okay, next item is to discuss street sign requests. This is in regard to the new subdivision, or one of our newer subdivisions on off of Plain Street. It's Blueberry Lane and Dogwood. And we've had multiple requests by residents, Anastasia Richter, Tyler Schilling, John Patzner, Claudia Conti, and David Block, with different requests for either stop signs, speed limits, dead end, multiple requests. So I'd actually like to just hand this over to Dennis, if you could talk about the process a little bit, Dennis, and what your recommendations are for the board.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as you know, Dogwood and Blueberry are part of the Crosswinds Estate subdivision, a relatively new subdivision in town. I believe was accepted on town meeting floor just this past year. However, homes have been in the subdivision since August of 2015, I believe was the first occupancy permit. So people have been living there for some time. And we have received quite a few requests from a few residents in especially Blueberry Lane, requesting that we do our best to deter trucks from turning around or entering and speeding, especially when there's a lot of children at play in this area. And I'm in agreement. It's if you've been down to the Crosswind Estates, it's the two roads are they're a T formation. In other words, Blueberry comes in off of I think it's Plain, and goes over to Dogwood, and Dogwood dead ends on both ends at 200-foot radius cul-de-sacs. They're not long streets, they're short roads, and they just went through the planning board process, so there was an opportunity for signs to be discussed through the planning board subdivision control, which I inquired through the planning board, and there was discussions, and they felt that what was needed was put out there. However, things have changed. You're getting a lot of truck traffic right now because of COVID-19. Everybody's ordering online. So from my own personal experience in driving out there and spending some time in the area, I really feel that most of the trucks that they're seeing are FedEx trucks, UPS trucks, Amazon deliveries. A lot of them are delivering to the homes out there. That being said, I think that we should the board should recommend some additional signage. And I put together a brief memo and basically talked about some of the requests and why I didn't agree with some of their requests, such as a dead end sign or not a throughway on Dogwood, when Dogwood actually does empty onto, Blueberry empties onto Dogwood. So I don't recommend that. And I didn't recommend speed limit signs, because speed limit signs actually don't always go the way that you anticipate them. A lot of people think that when you have a thickly settled area like the Crosswinds Estate, you can simply add a speed limit sign that says 10 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour. And for the board's perusal in my memo, I included Massachusetts general laws that actually speaks to what must be done before speed limit signs can actually go out there. And the end result could end up being something that's higher than the residents would like to see. However, I do think that we need to draw drivers' attention to the fact that there are a lot of children at play, and we want them to slow down. So the very last part of my memo, I included from the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, a sign that, according to the MUTCD, would be appropriate for that subdivision. And that is a slow children at play sign. And I proposed putting one at the very entrance to Blueberry, and then one in either direction as you enter Dogwood. And that's my recommendation.
Okay. Brett or Maureen, do you have any questions for Dennis?
No, I would agree with Dennis.
Yeah, same. I mean, clearly, you're the expert, Dennis, and everything seems very logical. I mean, it makes a lot of sense to not put a dead end on a road that has another connecting road. It's very confusing to people. And yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And it's great that we're able to respond to all these folks. I'm sure they'll all be pleased, even the folks that called for different types of signage. I think they'll be glad just to have the slow children and the other signs in there. It's great.
Dennis, at the bottom of, at the very end of Blueberry, you don't think that a stop sign there would be warranted? Would that be just overkill, so to say?
So the only issue that we may have with it is because it went through subdivision control laws and a stop sign was not recommended at that point. There are, a lot of people don't realize it, but here in the Massachusetts, there are rules associated with signs. Most signs fall underneath warnings or information for drivers, and each town of the 351 cities and towns in the Commonwealth has a blanket permit with MassDOT for the Board of Selectmen, in this case, to be the authority to issue those signs to go up. But regulatory signs still require a process. And because we went through a process and a stop sign was not put up, I would have to do some investigating, but I believe that we would have to go through another process to put a stop sign at the end of Dogwood. I don't think we could just put one there.
Okay. All right, if there are no further questions for Dennis, I will take a motion.
I make a motion to install signs on Blueberry Lane according to Dennis's recommendations.
Second, Maureen Dwinell.
Stephen Metellian, aye. They make that unanimous action.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah.
Okay, next item is discuss the town Memorial Day ceremony. Derek, if I could hand this off to you and you could talk about this a little bit.
Sure.
I guess the background, of course, is we have our ceremony every Memorial Day as far as we meet at the cemeteries. We have a parade in town and we have a ceremony on the town common. Sorry, go ahead, Derek.
Thank you. So, as you pointed out, Memorial Day is fastly approaching. Unfortunately, the VFW had to cancel Loyalty Day. And folks, and so as you all know, that there's many individuals that volunteer their time to try to put Memorial Day festivities together each and every year. And that goes everything from attending the cemetery sites to putting the parade together. So, I thought that given, I think we try to hold off as long as possible to see which way the virus is going to take us. Here we are on May 5th, and we are still seeing some light, I would say now, based upon some recent data. But it's still, to me, it seems like it's too early to try to hold gatherings of that size. If we can think about, the last couple of years, we've had great weather, and we've had hundreds of people standing along Main Street watching the parade. I did survey the Central Mass town managers, and I asked them what they were doing, and I would say a little more than a half a dozen had responded, and all the respondents had said that they canceled both the Memorial Day activities and the 4th of July activities because of COVID-19. So, this is on the agenda for the board to discuss so that we can notify the public in an appropriate time frame as to what our intentions will be.
Okay. Brett or Maureen, do you have any comment or any questions for Derek?
Yeah, I think
No.
just clear.
Go ahead, Brett.
No, I was just going to say, I think clearly, we're not, we can't have a gathering, right? Like, I don't think there's any question in my mind anyway about that. I think it's just the responsible thing to do. I don't know that there's, I can't imagine making any other choice personally. That said, it's just tragic that that's something that has to be done. I would imagine that I'm sure nobody in this room or on this call can remember a time when we didn't have a Memorial Day event in the town of Upton. I don't know, Paul or Jen or, I'm sorry, Maureen or any of you guys, Steve, has this ever happened before?
I don't
No.
think so. But I can't recall back quite that far.
Yeah.
The,
So,
the parade got rained out a couple of times.
I can
but
go
they
back
moved it to
further.
the town-
than
They
all
moved
those.
the thing to the town hall.
yeah.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
can go back further than all of you, and I can't ever remember not celebrating Memorial Day and the veterans.
Yeah. So, it's, go ahead, Derek. Sorry.
No, I not to interrupt, but because I'm with your sentiments, like in time as that. I wonder if there's something we can do. I wonder if we can work with the VFW. And every year we read off the names to those who have served the town of Upton. I wonder if we could at least do a recording. So just a small group, like we would typically stand at the common, read off those names, have it recorded, and then play that on government channel. It's some way to honor those who've gone before us.
Mhm. Yeah, and that was going to be my point, sort of where I was going with that, right? Like to not do anything just seems we just can't. I think we have to do something. So whether it's driving by the I don't know, whether we have people go around, send some fire trucks and some police cars around, and have people stand on their driveways and wave flags. I mean, I don't know. I don't have a good idea, but I feel like we need to try to do something that respects and honors our veterans and those that have passed.
Yes, Maureen, go ahead.
Well, I was wondering if we as a board just could go before the veterans, VFW, and do something just naming off all the veterans in town. At least something.
I agree, and it's, the word, I think, Brett, you chose a good word. I think tragic is the word, because
Yeah.
when you think of town and you think of us as a community, and you think really, when is the town really busting with energy, and you really feel that sense of patriotism and also gratitude for those who served our country and served, obviously, our town, make our town proud. So I don't know what the right answer is. It sounds like, Derek, you had a good idea with the names. Brett, Maureen, I don't know. Is this something, Derek, you think we should, we have a little bit of time to kind of brainstorm on this and see what we think we could do creatively to come up with something?
Yeah. I mean, I think that we can do a lot of things. It's just really up to what do we want to do. We don't have a lot of time to organize something. We probably got a couple of weeks to organize something and let folks know. As Brett pointed out, do we want to have our fire trucks and cruisers drive down the streets? And that's, if we're going to do that, then we need to notify the public. So or we could just work with the VFW and the folks over there, and like I said, call off the names at the town common like we've done every year and record that and make that known. So, I mean, there's a couple of things we could do. Do we want to put a committee together to kind of brainstorm this a little bit, kick around some ideas?
Yeah, I think
Get
that's
the VFW involved.
And
Steve?
definitely get the VFW involved. Sorry, Paul, just a quick point before I forget that. Getting the VFW involved is a great idea. And I also wonder, this may happen already. Do we fly flags at half staff in the town, whether it's the post office or wherever? So if that's not something that's done, I wonder if that's something. But again, just check with the VFW. They're the experts. Whatever we do, we want to make sure it's recognizable to people in the community and appropriate and consistent with what the veterans would expect.
Yeah,
and deserve.
And Russell Wood always has, kind of an itinerary with the way he lays it out every year, the ceremony. So I think that'd probably be a good place to start is with Russ and with Russell, I should say, and with the VFW. Maureen, did you have your hand up? Do I see?
No, just that I think we need to do the roll call for all the past veterans.
Yes, I agree. I would certainly want to, we could record that. I would be absolutely proud to stand there and read as many names as I can.
Me too.
Steve?
Yes, Paul, did you have a comment?
Yeah, historically, the Upton Veterans Council have been always the moving force behind that. And, I agree what Brett said the first thing you should do is probably bring them in and see how they want to run it.
Okay. Can we just reach out to them, Derek, or do we not have to? Yeah, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you.
No, I was just going to, I will email Russell Wood and organize a meeting, hopefully, if he's available for Friday.
Derek?
Yes.
Derek, we can talk to Sean Craig tomorrow. He's the commander.
Thursday night, right?
Yeah, I meant Thursday.
Yep, that's a good point.
So my friend Google here just said that there's a couple of communities that are, it sounds crazy, doing a public Zoom meeting where they're going to do the readings, they're going to play music, they're going to read poems, they're going to have whatever speeches are, they would normally do, some high school students speaking. So again, let's just be creative and try to think outside the box. Zoom seems crazy to a lot of people, but I also think a lot of people that never would have thought they were doing video conferencing are finding themselves doing it and learning how to use the technology. So that's, something to consider anyway.
Okay. I'll reach out and report back.
Okay. Very well. The next agenda item is motion to accept various donations. We had 3 donations from the Hunts and Sullivan family on up at 90 Taft Street. They were gift certificates from the Rose Garden, the Country Super, and also the Little Coffee Bean. I believe the amounts are $50 each, so a total of $150. I did not see in the notes here, was there anything in particular, or this was just goodwill? And this again was for the DPW, I believe. Is that correct, Derek?
That's correct. That was $150 donated to the DPW employees.
Okay. And those 3 certificates again are the 3 of the local restaurants in town. So Brett, Maureen, any comments or questions?
No, I'm ready to move on that.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's a great recognition and a great gift. So we'll gladly accept it. But Maureen, go ahead. You want to make the motion?
I move that we approve the Hunt and Sullivan donation of $150 to the DPW.
Second, Brett Simus, aye.
Stephen
Maureen,
Metellian?
oh.
Go ahead,
Maureen, aye.
And Stephen Metellian, aye. Make that unanimous action. And thank you to those 2 families. Next agenda item, motion of intention to lay out Azalea Lane as a public way. The Board of Selectmen must first vote on its intent to lay out the road and refer to the matter to the Planning Board for its recommendation. Thereafter, the Board of Selectmen vote to lay out the road. It will then go to our annual town meeting to be approved. I think we talked about this once before. My sister and her family actually live on this road. So I will ask Brett or Maureen, shall I recuse myself? Do you see any conflict in any way? I can recuse myself if you need me to.
Only to be on the safe side, Steve.
All
we don't want the appearance of.
Okay. I will.
I think you just mute your phone and your camera, right?
I will. I'll recuse myself for a minute or 2. I'll be right back.
Yeah, I mean, this is more of an administrative thing. I don't think there's been any controversy questions or anything regarding Azalea Lane that I'm aware of. Derek, is there anything, or Dennis, anything you've heard or seen?
No, not to my knowledge. I'll refer the technical stuff to Dennis if he has any comments. But just for the public's edification, this is an administrative process that's required prior to going to town meeting. There's a document titled Order of Layout of Azalea Lane that has to be motioned and approved by the Board of Selectmen. and then filed with the town clerk 8 days in advance of town meeting. So again, this is administrative by nature. We've discussed Azalea Lane. It's certainly an article that's already been placed on the warrant for the town meeting members to vote to accept it as a public way.
So, Dennis, anything from your perspective?
Whoa, what's that?
There is, Derek is correct, town manager is correct. The board does need to lay the road out. There is a small laundry list of items that the contractor is aware of and is working with the planning board. Mostly it's one street light that needs to go up at the very corner of West River and Azalea, and that is more of a National Grid thing. The request is already in. We're just waiting for the scheduling. And then of the tree plantings that are out there, there are a handful of trees that are in question on whether or not they are actually going to take or they are no longer growing. And the contractor is aware of that. The planning board addressed that at their last meeting. There is a subsequent inspection coming up with myself, the contractor, and the town's review engineer for the planning board to discuss a schedule for finishing up these few items, but none of this should hinder the vote tonight.
Okay. Great. Anything else or questions, Maureen, from your perspective? Otherwise, I can make the motion.
No, you make the motion.
I move that the Board of Selectmen vote its intention to lay out Azalea Lane as a public way, as all is shown on a plan entitled Layout Plan of Azalea Lane, JR Estates, Upton, Mass., dated August 22nd, 2019, prepared by Goyer and Hanlon, Inc., and to forward this vote and the plan to the planning board for its comments and recommendation pursuant to General Law, Chapter 41, Section 81G and 81I.
Second, Maureen Dwinell.
Mark that as majority action, Sandy. Go ahead, Derek.
Can I make one? Yeah, just one comment to the board members. Both this document and the treasure collector's ban document will be available for your signatures tomorrow prior till noon in the conference room. So I know it's short notice, but Ken Glowacki did notify us today that he needs the document so that he can have it FedEx by Thursday. So if you at your leisure tomorrow, if you could stop by and sign certainly the ban, and while you're there, we'll have you Azalea layout as well for your signatures.
Derek, is somebody going to be there in the morning?
Yes. What time?
You call it. I can be there. I'd just soon do it in the morning.
Sure. 8:30. How does that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Okay. I as well will try to get in sometime in the morning hours. Just not exactly sure when. I can give you a call before I can stop in. What did you say, Derek? It needs to be executed by, did you say tomorrow or Friday?
I can ask that they be executed. His is executed tomorrow, so he can put it in FedEx. He needs to get it there by Thursday.
I see. Okay. Next agenda item. Discussion on scholarship applicants. This is our annual Board of Selectmen scholarships. The board, according to the policy, is available annually. We have maximum 8 scholarships. We can award 6 $500 scholarships from the E.W. Ristine Scholarship Fund or the Ristine B. Welfare Trust Fund, and also 2 $200 scholarships, one from the Ramsey Trust Fund and one from the Gary Bates Scholarship Fund. Having said that, once again, I will need to recuse myself. I have a daughter that is a graduating senior, and she has applied for a scholarship. So, having said that, I will recuse myself.
All right. So Maureen, there were, correct me if I'm wrong, Sandy, it looks like there were 7 applicants. Is that correct?
Yes, there were.
Okay. And do we have the flexibility to adjust the amounts, or it's always 6 at 500, 2 at 200? The reason I'm asking is, can we allocate all of the money across a subset of these people or all of these people, given that there's only 7 applicants for 8 scholarships, or are we restricted to 6 at 500, 2 at 200?
That is how the scholarship policy is written.
Yeah.
I think that you can really, at your pleasure, make whatever, because they're coming all out of trust funds and you manage the trust funds. So it's really up
Okay.
at your pleasure.
Okay. So, maybe I don't know, Maureen, what are your thoughts? There were absolutely some remarkable standouts, in my opinion, of folks that applied, really, really just some impressive applicants and other people, that I think, applied, but either didn't have the experience, the intent, or the time, and sort of filled out the paperwork and submitted it, and no disrespect to them, but I don't think they put much energy or effort into it, which is okay. There's no judgment there, but I think there was a clear difference, and so I didn't know how we might accommodate that.
So we only have 7 applicants, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. May I just say something?
Yes.
One of the applicants is a resident of Mendon, but attends the Mendon Upton Regional District School System. And I did note that on the cover sheet.
Mm-hmm. Well, is there any way that we can, do the $500 scholarships to the Upton and $200 scholarship to Mendon?
I haven't read the trust for this. Is it intended for it probably says the school district, right? It's non-distinctive between. I just don't want to set a precedent that we've never that we're not aware of. Have we given this to Upton or Mendon residents before?
Not in my tenure.
So there is no distinction between Upton and Mendon students?
It says a deserving Upton student.
Oh.
Yeah, list first to an Upton senior who demonstrates and identifies their intent to pursue further education. So I'm not sure we can get this to a Mendon applicant.
So it does not differentiate between the regional and actually Upton students.
Not that I see. Again, I just don't want to set a precedent without intending to. So it sounds like this. Is there anybody on the phone that knows of or has heard of any of these scholarships being awarded outside of the town of Upton?
Brett?
Yeah.
I've been around a while. I've never heard of it being done. But I think you just said that it says an Upton student. So I mean, it's like
So yeah.
What?
It says Upton student.
Yeah. Yeah, it says Upton student or Upton senior or so just so how are you interpreting that, Paul?
Just as it says, Upton student. A student from Upton.
Okay. Oh, that's what I was clarifying. Okay, so you're of the opinion that this is something that's for Upton residents only, as opposed to Mendon residents attending Upton schools or regional schools.
My recollection is that the Derek can probably help me out on this. This one of these clauses was reprobated, I think, some years ago, especially with this aid to the Upton High School or something like that. And because there is no Upton High School, it went on to include the regional school district, and I think every so often the board awards money out of one of those things to the school district. But as far as what the applicability here is, if it says Upton student, I think it means a student from the town of Upton. I may be wrong, but
Go ahead, Derek.
Yeah, I would just make just 2 notes just to remind, and this was, not that far ago. To Paul's point, the Board of Selectmen did award approximately $30,000 to the school district to purchase iPads for school students. And this came up with which students were going to get, because I believe it was going to go to MISCO. They were going to have these iPads go to MISCO, and we remember we had the conversation, well, are they just going to give it to the MISCO students from Upton? And the answer was no. They couldn't. There's no way they could differentiate. So I think that may have opened up a slight door. I do agree with the policy says for Upton seniors. Keep in mind that the slippery slope that we could run is that if a BVT student who lives in Northbridge or Millbury or further away could then also apply, and we could be opening up a Pandora's box to 13 different communities that BVT provides services to.
It's a great point, and one that's well taken. So, I'm of the mindset that this was intended by the folks that created the trusts for Upton residents. So I don't know, Maureen, if you agree with that. If so, then we'll just move on and eliminate the Mendon applicant.
I do agree with that.
Okay, so that leaves 6 folks again. We have a total of $3,400. So, I don't know, Maureen, do we want to divide that up? Do we want to just sort of stick with the 500 amounts and figure out how to distribute it, or what are your thoughts?
I would rather just divide it up, seeing how we only have 6 from Upton.
Yeah. So I agree with dividing it up. I mean, there was one applicant that even though there were only 6 applicants, I would frankly not award them the scholarship, just based on the application. So, but if we didn't want to do that, maybe we could award that person $200 and then split the rest up, because there were 3 others that I sort of put in the top tier, and then there was, one that was in the middle and one that was, sort of at the bottom.
Mm-hmm. I can go along with that, Brett.
Okay. So I'm just gonna add some numbers here quick. 1, 2, 3. We could do 1,000 to the top 3, and then 200 to each of the bottom 2. We could do 750 to the top. What's 750 times 4 is 15 is 3. 750 to the top 4, and then 4 to the other one. So there would be 4 750 and then 1 at 400.
I think I would go along with that, Brett.
Okay. So how do we make these motions, Sandy, or how do we talk about the applicants? Do we number them? I don't think we should talk about them.
I think there's a number beside their name, Brett, and if you just tell me the number.
Okay, perfect.
As the identifier to that person.
Yep,
I
great.
can get back on. I don't even have the names in front of me.
Take your time, Maureen, but I'll just take them in order that they're in the document, Sandy. I assume that's the numbers we should use.
Yep. Yes.
Okay. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, hold on. on.
Jen.
My math is off. You guys should have called me on my math. Hold on one sec. I gotta get out a calculator. Let's see. Okay, so if we do, there are.
Good morning. Tens of thousands of people in our.
There is, so there are 5 people, 6 people we want to make awards to. So we can do 5 of them at 640 and 1 of them at 400. Or sorry, 1 of them at 200, right? So if we did 5 at 640 and then 1 at 200.
Brett,
Does that work? Yeah.
could I point out something?
Of course.
Doesn't the plan here say that they're supposed to be distributed according to the will? That it says the 5 scholarships funded by the E.W. Ristine Scholarship Fund? If the other trust fund? I'm not so sure you can just modify the intent of that bequeathment.
It's the.
I don't think that wasn't specified in the will, Paul.
No.
That was something that we just came up as a BOS policy. But given that we don't have the number of applicants for each of these awards, it doesn't make sense for us to not award all of the money that's available to be awarded each year. So that's what we had.
Case, fine. I have no objection.
Yeah, but I want to make sure others agree with that. That was what I heard people saying, and that's my view, is that we should award all of the money. And this is
And that's what you did last. That's what you did last year too.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
So it would be 5 at 640 and 1 at 200. And Sandy, for me, Maureen, have you been able to grab that list or look at it online?
I have each application, but I don't know. Are we taking them in order that Sandy sent them to us?
Exactly. We'll just take them in order. And to make it easy, it's the top 5 are the ones that I would motion for the 640. And then the last one, which would have been 7 on the list, would be the one for 200.
Okay.
Okay. So I would move that we take the top 5 on the list sent to us by Sandy, and the 6th one to be at $640, and the last on the list to be at $200.
Okay.
And that's eliminating the Mendon resident, Sandy. So
Correct.
hold on
Yes.
for a
Yep. Oh, I'm sorry. And eliminating the Mendon resident.
Yeah. So I second that, but Simus, we can show it as majority action.
Maureen Donnell, aye. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate folks working through that. We need like a flag to flag Steve back. There he is.
You going to be able to take any more votes tonight?
I'm like a defunct selectman. I just can't get anything done tonight.
We're going to have to dock your pay.
Oh, wait, I might have to. I'm going to serve a few extra weeks, so I guess I'll make it up somehow, right?
There you go.
Fair point. Fair point.
Since the election's getting delayed, even if I get kicked to the curb, somebody's going to get a free month of labor out of me. So
That's a good thing.
Plus,
it's not often, right? Right, Maureen?
That's right.
Come on, I'm a pretty hard worker. Give me a little credit.
Yeah,
doubt.
you are.
Somebody throw me a lifeline, would you? All right, so we are on to Article 4.7, discussion on aerial spraying.
Oh,
This is in regard, a resident had emailed the board. Baker Polito administration had filed legislation to actually, once again, resume spraying of the entire state. I had a chance to read some of the press release regarding this and the chemical that is being considered in use. Having said that, I think I'll throw this out for discussion. Brett, Maureen, tell me, what are your thoughts?
I would recommend that I would recommend and advocate for us sending a letter to our state reps or directly to the governor's office expressing the fact that our town has voted on multiple occasions to not allow or join the central mass spraying pact, and that we don't support it and we're not in favor of this legislation. I think town meeting has spoken very clearly on multiple occasions about this topic. I recognize that the state has a certain authority, right? They did the spraying last year because they deemed that there was a risk. So we already have limited control because as a locality, and the state can already come in and use their authority to spray if they deem it necessary. I don't think that they need additional authority on top of what they've already got to take more rights, not rights, but to take that decision making away from the town. I think the people in this town have made a decision. They voted clearly. They've reinforced that vote on multiple occasions, and I think we would be doing them a disservice to do anything other than express our concern at this legislation being passed.
Yeah, very good. I agree with that. Maureen, did you have your hand up? Did you want to talk about that?
yeah. I am in favor of legislation. Only because I've been around this for so long and seen what could happen. And I personally spray my own property. But there are other properties around. It does absolutely no good. And the spraying has changed since I first got involved in it, as far as being more organic. But I leave it up to the people to vote. If that's the way they want to vote, I am personally in favor of it.
I've always looked at this, as you said, Brett, this has come up numerous times at town meeting, and the people are very, very, I want to say, iron-willed against this action. And really the words that come to mind and that I keep hearing, at least what I recall from town meeting, is government overreach. And if the town has spoken on numerous occasions and had said no to mosquito spraying, this just seems like somebody's not listening to the people. And, and I certainly want to do that. We're here as a board to represent the people of the town. So I guess, Brett, in addition to what you had mentioned, and I guess I'll toss this over to you, Derek. In addition to what Brett had mentioned, what are your thoughts? Is there any other action that we as a board could talk about, or we as a board could act upon?
Right. So let me start by saying that when I first read this proposed legislation, I was scratching my head because I'm trying to understand what authority the state is trying to gain through this legislation. They already had taken action last year by conducting aerial spraying throughout the Commonwealth. So I don't know what other authority they think they need to do aerial spraying or any other type of spraying. And I did, to be honest with you, I reached out to some of our state legislators and tried to get clarity on this bill. And they did not have any insight. They did not have any idea what additional authority they were trying to gain from this. So as far as the bill goes, I I don't have a lot to comment on because it seems like those that will approve the bill or deny the bill are still trying to see clarity on it. And you know, we can harken back to last spring and last fall, where the state directed aerial spraying without the town's ability to deny it. And then, as you all recall, fall town meeting, it was quickly defeated at town meeting. It didn't take more than 5 minutes to realize that town meeting was not going to support this. So, you know, if the board decides to take action, we can certainly craft a message to the governor, I would say, opposing the bill if that's what the board decides.
Okay, so we could draft a letter to the governor and then also draft letters to our David Meridian and Senator Moore and let them know our position.
That's right.
Okay. And once again, if we can do that, I'd be willing to come in and certainly sign the bill and anything else that we need to do to you know, make sure that our voice is heard strong.
And this is Chris Scott from the Conservation Commission. May I address the board?
Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry, could you repeat your name one more time, please?
Christine Scott from the Conservation Commission.
Okay, Christine Scott from the Conservation Commission. Go ahead.
I was just going to mention that on Thursday, May 7th, the Conservation Commission is having a meeting so that we can draft a letter from the Commission on behalf of the town.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And I would certainly encourage you to do that, and that, you know, absolutely, you know, make the town look even more unified in our opposition to this action.
Okay, thank you.
That's great.
Very good. Thank you for your input.
Derek, do we need a motion on this or anything, or just draft the letter? I assume Steve and I need to, or we need to make a motion.
Yes, please, definitely.
So I make a motion that we draft a letter opposing the legislation entitled "An Act to Mitigate Arbovirus in the Commonwealth" to both our local state representative, Representative Meridian and Senator Moore, as well as to the governor's office.
I would second the motion. Stephen Metellian.
Maureen Dwinell, no.
Maureen is no. Okay. We can make that a majority action, Sandy. There was a quote in the box. I think I just missed it. Kelly, is there any way to bring that back up? I think there was either a caller or someone that had a comment about the spraying.
On the chat? Okay, hold on.
Yeah,
I can read it, Steve, if I may.
Yes, please. Go ahead, Brett.
This is from Lori Woden. This allows for proactive spraying so that they can spray before they have evidence that they need it. The statewide CONCOM is against it, as is Mass Autobahn and many, many groups. The chemicals are very strong, and they advertise organic materials as a screen for the toxic chemicals that are the main agents.
All right, very good. Laura, thank you for your comments. Okay, next agenda item 4.8, discuss town meeting and town election dates. This is obviously an ongoing concern. We obviously had to postpone both of those meetings and the election. Derek, do you have any ideas as to, I guess as we know it now, the governor had a plan to relax the stay-at-home order on May 18th. But I know as of today, I was reading the news this afternoon, and I believe it was 1,140 cases today. So do you have some intel on what you think is going to happen as far as the state's concerns?
Yeah, so I was on a conference call this afternoon with the Lieutenant Governor, who spent 60 minutes with town managers across the state. She did talk about the 1,100 cases today, 1,000 cases yesterday, and that is certainly a trend downward compared to where we were just even a week ago. So she did like that. She did say that that was trend in the right direction. She talked about the statewide task force that has been put together to come up with phasing and reopening of certain businesses over a period of time. She did not state whether or not May 18th was going to be phase one of the reopening. She often talked about needing the public health metrics in place before they go ahead and start the first phase of the reopening. She did mention, which I'm trying to get clarity on, so Governor Baker issued, I believe it was order number 13 back in March, where he, in essence, issued the stay-at-home order and closed businesses across the Commonwealth. In that order, he referenced all essential businesses having to be closed, and that the state you could not congregate in a setting of more than 10 people, which obviously would rule out town meetings. However, there is an exemption in there that exempts municipal legislative bodies from adhering to Governor Baker's order number 13. She, in her comments today, believed the towns had to abide by the prohibition against 10 or more people. So until we get clarity on that, I think that poses at least a challenge as far as what we can do next. I will say though, under any circumstance in the next 6 to 8 weeks, if we hold town meeting, we're going to have proper protective measures in place. And what I mean by protective measures, we're going to have to plan having cloth face coverings for individuals, trying to maintain 6-foot distancing as a secondary protective measure, so on and so forth. And I think we can do that. Especially, I would have been more concerned if we were absolutely going to have an override question on the warrant. Now, I know that still remains to be discussed, and that'll be discussed with the Finance Committee on Thursday evening. But one thing I can tell you is that I would expect a significant low turnout if there is not an override question at town meeting. And as you know, override questions usually turn out a higher number of individuals. So if we have a lower turnout, I think it's more manageable in that type of setting. So that's town meeting. As far as town election, Kelly and I, we've had multiple conversations about town election, and that's a much more controlled environment. We feel very confident that we could put a number of protective measures in place that folks can go ahead and feel confident that they voted in a safe manner, to include a big push on absenteeism for voting. So if you're asking for a recommendation, I would say that possibly, again, Kelly and I discussed this, that June 16th, right, Kelly? I think we were targeting for a possible election, and then the week thereafter, targeting for a town meeting. That would give us plenty of notice to the community what's going to happen, and from today's date, it would give us approximately 7 weeks for the town to relax even more of their reopening restrictions.
And just to clarify, and I'm sorry, just to clarify, we're looking to do, in this case, we're looking to do the election before the town meeting, because, I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Now, we changed our bylaw a few years back to do it in the opposite order. So how would that work?
I believe because of the state laws allowing us to postpone town elections and town meetings, our local bylaws are not in effect at this point. We can use and just set the dates according to what we think is best. As Derek said, having an election could be for anyone that decides to vote in person, we can set it up very similar to someone going into a grocery store and make it as safe as possible for them. At the same time, it gives another week for town meeting for things to die down a little bit, to have town meeting at a later date.
Okay. Brett or Maureen, do you have any thoughts or any comments or questions for either Derek or Kelly? Go ahead, Maureen. Maureen, you are muted.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
As far as the town meeting, now, is there any way we can set up remote access to town meeting through, let's say, in the cafeteria and the auditorium? Can we do anything like that?
I think that would be difficult because of the way the moderator calls the vote, and it's a voice vote. So that would be challenging for him to try to measure the number of yeas versus the number of nays if it's in multiple rooms.
So because of the situation this year with the COVID, can he change the way he does things?
I think the only way we would be able to call for a vote at that point is electronic voting would be one avenue, or we'd have to have a hand count on every vote and have workers in each one of those separated rooms hand counting the votes.
We were in this situation before in Hopkinton, and we had people set up in the cafeteria, the auditorium, the gymnasium, because we had so many people for a big article or whatever. But they counted. We had counters in each and every area, and they counted the votes and then would phone in or go in to whatever they had set up and take the count that way.
Would it be possible for us to do an estimate of how many people we can accommodate in the Nipmuc Auditorium based on whatever protocols we would use with the 6-foot spacing? Because I agree, Derek, if there's no override and we don't expect there to be, there's going to be very limited attendance, and I've got to believe we can get, I don't even know the number, but we can get a good number of people into that room spaced appropriately. But if the number is 40, that's different than the number's 100. So, maybe we need a primary and contingency plan. So if we can get 60 people in the auditorium, then we're good. If we have to go to 100 people, then we've got to open up the cafeteria and figure it out. We should probably have those plans because we don't want to have to figure it out, the night of the town meeting.
Yeah, we absolutely could lay all that out. And again, we'd have to think about, what that looks like. So if, a husband and a wife came together, well, we wouldn't ask them to be 6 feet apart, right? So we'd sit them together. So we can definitely count the number of seats and try to estimate how many we can get in the auditorium, and then as a contingency plan, use the cafeteria, which is adjacent to the auditorium. So that's something we certainly can pursue. That'd be easy.
Steve?
I just want to make one quick comment, Kelly. I'm just sitting here listening to the deliberation back and forth, and we're talking about some numbers what we think we can accommodate. And the reality may be, if we need to draw in extra rooms, is this an opportunity to maybe throw out a survey monkey and see if people would want to entertain the fact of electronic voting? I mean, because ultimately people are going to be concerned because, again, it's a voice vote. So if I'm sitting in row 7 and somebody in row 9 is, sure, they're 6 feet apart, but if they're yelling their vote, aren't I going to have that little bit of doubt in my mind? Just to me, again, and I know this really comes back to mosquito control. People were not in favor of electronic voting. There was, there were some people that had genuine concerns, but I looked at this and I thought, with these issues that we have right now, is that the safest way to accomplish and the most inviting way to accomplish town meeting?
Well, before I talk about electronic voting, another option that we might want to consider, where there might be more room, that instead of having the town meeting in the auditorium, which is definitely more comfortable, we could also, and Derek, I apologize, this is just coming to mind now, is we could also accommodate it in the gymnasium. Between the stands that come out and chairs on the floor, you could probably definitely accommodate more voters sitting there and having a stage for the moderator and the Board of Selectmen. So I think if at the same time, if we were going to do a count for how many people could fit in the auditorium, we could also do a count for how many people would fit in the gymnasium. And I would imagine the gymnasium would be a little bit larger and accommodate a larger crowd. And then everybody's in one room, and then you wouldn't have to worry about the electronic voting system. Just an idea to throw out there, that if we're making those determinations, we can explore both options.
And I know you're going to comment on electronic voting, but we should also include the cafeteria in that assessment, because I'm not sure if the cafeteria is bigger or smaller than the gym. It may, if it's smaller.
It's smaller.
Okay.
So.
But we can analyze all 3 spaces, though.
And when it comes to electronic voting, I really think under the current circumstances that we have, I personally, and this is my personal opinion, I would find it a little more disconcerting for our regular voters to have to deal with a new system at the same time that we're trying to make sure that we're social distancing and everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. I wouldn't want to introduce a new system to voting while we're trying to accommodate safety precautions. It could be done, but I think it's a lot at one time. And I think we would need to know more of how many voters would fit in each of the rooms before we would even guess on whether or not we needed a voting system.
Any other questions for either Derek or Kelly? And do we want to get that information first and then try to decide, what's the best space for it? Or again, as far as, do we have, I guess the other question is, do we have a quota that we need to, quorum, I should say, that we need to achieve to have an active town meeting?
For town meeting, it's 40.
It's 40, and there's legislation that's in the House right now that will reduce that down to 10%, no less than 10% of your quorum. So it's 10% of 40. 4?
Yeah.
Right. So if the legislation passes, it would allow that you could reduce it down to 10% of your quorum.
Kelly, Mr. Steve?
Yes, go ahead, Paul.
I might ask my good friend, Madam Town Clerk, once the meeting is called to order, it is then the moderator's meeting. Am I correct?
Yes.
He makes the rules, so it might be wise to bring David into this discussion before you get too far along.
I agree. I have had a conversation with him. I think at this point, my opinion is it's better to let the residents know at this point that we will be scheduling the election in the town meeting and what those dates are to move the community forward. And then we can make the hard decisions on exactly how we're going to accomplish it. So I personally think it's good to announce the dates at this point and stop publicizing it so everyone can plan accordingly.
Right. I think we can pick the dates, if I may, Steve. We can pick the dates, and then we can work out the accommodating each of the different activities. So I think we have plenty of time to figure it out. I agree with sort of picking the date. So we were looking at, I guess, Maureen, I don't have any concerns with the election happening before the town meeting. I don't think it's great. I think there's a reason we changed it, but given the circumstances, I don't know that, that's a showstopper. I think we should push out the town meeting as far as we can, and the 23rd seems like it's about as far as you'd want to push it. I don't know. Do you have a concern with order?
I would agree with that, Brett.
Okay. So then we'd be looking at the 16th for the town election and the 20th for the town meeting.
Correct.
Do you want me to make a
16th and 20th, you said?
23rd.
23rd, I'm sorry.
Yeah, 23rd. Okay. So 7 days apart.
Yeah. Is that okay with you, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, I think it's a good idea to pick the dates. My only concern is I don't like the idea of, I like the idea of being able to get a true quorum. I think it's to only have 4 people at a town meeting. To me, you've kind of circumvented the democratic process, I guess would be the only thing that comes to my mind. But by all means, if we can make these dates, that would be great. I just don't know, given the state of the state, I don't know if it'll happen, but we'll try.
And if I may, what's the process? Again, I think the 16th and the 23rd are great. I support it. I think that's the motion we should make, and we'll do that. Is there any provision for pushing these further if that should become required either by the state or for any reason, or do we, maybe we should just cross that bridge when we come to it, but has there been any discussion of that?
I can't speak to the election, but I can speak to the town meeting, that if we push it beyond July 1st, we'd have to petition the Department of Revenue to approve a 1/12 budget.
Okay. So there's an option there if we need to. Hopefully we're not in that place, but there are some provisions if we need to do that.
Yes.
Okay. And I guess, Eric, getting back to your earlier comments, talking about Lieutenant Governor Polito, and she was talking about steps in the right direction regarding case count. Did she talk about maybe a number where they're trying to get to, a number that they're happy, where they feel they can open the state and resume, so to say, business as usual?
Well, she did reference, and I think I talked about it at our last meeting, the White House gating criteria, which a lot of the states aren't following the White House recommendations for gating and moving along through the different phases. But she did say that they were using that as a model in which there's an expectation that the state would have steady declines for 14 consecutive days. And again, we've had 2 consecutive days of a decline, and she's hopeful that we'll continue to have those steady declines, because that'll lead us right up into May 18th, which then they would go ahead and start to loosen some restrictions. And Rhode Island has already unveiled their reopening plan. New Hampshire started on May 4th. Maine started the week prior. So a lot of the states around Massachusetts, outside of Connecticut, that is, have already implemented their phase 1 of their reopening plan. So Massachusetts, though, all those other states pale in comparison as far as the number of cases and the number of deaths that Massachusetts has had. So certainly you can see why they're a little bit ahead of us. But they do hope to test. They have a goal of testing 30,000 people per day. They peaked last week testing 15,000 people in one day. So just put that in comparison. New Hampshire's goal to test in one day is 1,500. So they want to do 1,500 in one day. Massachusetts wants to do 30,000 in one day. So they're very ambitious. They're very aggressive in trying to get their arms around this issue.
Okay.
So are we ready for a motion?
I was going to say, if there's no other comments or questions, I will take a motion.
Sorry, Steve, I didn't mean to jump on your opportunity there.
That's all right.
Okay. So I make a motion that we hold the Upton Town election on Tuesday, June 16th, and the town meeting for Upton on Tuesday, June 23rd.
Second, Maureen Dwinell.
And make that unanimous action. Stephen Metellian. All right. Next is recognition. Does anybody have anything for recognition? Go ahead, Maureen.
I'd like to recognize Sandra Hackala for all the information that she's provided and the policies she's set in place and all the hard work that she's done during this whole thing.
I second that.
Yeah, well said. Make that unanimous.
Thank you.
Good job, Sandra.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great.
All right. On to town manager's report.
Okay, so just a few updates. I think you all have noticed 6 Main Street is no longer standing in place, the building that is. The demolition was completed at the end of last week. They were able to backfill it and then loom and seed the top. You will notice if you were to walk the property, that on the far right of the property, looking at the Milton Steam buildings on your left, that there is a corner of the foundation that still exists. And so that had to exist for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, there was a lot of concern about erosion because that piece of that corner is so close to the brook, and if they try to grade it on such a drastic slope, there'd be major erosion concerns heading into the brook. So that was one concern. And the other issue was, and I had this conversation with conservation agent David Pickup, is that if that property is expected to be redeveloped down the road, that right now the conservation bylaw requires a 100-foot buffer from any wetland. And so if we would remove that corner there, we would lose the footprint of the building, and therefore any new construction would have to be 100 feet away from the brook. So the conservation, his recommendation was to keep that there, not only for erosion purposes, but in order for future development purposes, at least we would have the flexibility to build up to that point. So it does pose some safety hazards. Dennis and I have already had that conversation. Once weather permits, we're going to see what we can do to try to put some type of fencing along that wall. It's probably 5 to 6 feet, and we're more worried about kids goofing around over there and falling off the side of the wall. So we're looking at some options that we can put over there just to prevent someone from slipping over the side of that wall. And then lastly, the total cost to demo that property was $58,000. We received the grant for $25,000 from the state. So we're going to go ahead and seek reimbursement for that. So we're going to close out that project. Any questions before I move further?
I have none. Brett or Maureen?
So,
okay, go ahead.
Just so you know, DPW's at full operations. Once the governor had declared a stay-at-home order, we try to get everybody at home and try to be as safe as possible. But since then, there's been a lot of evolution of what are safe practices in the workplace. Dennis has been working with his team. They're now back doing full operations, but we've implemented a number of different measures so that they can work in a safe manner. They have cloth face coverings. They are not working in large group settings, and they're trying to maintain physical distancing at 6 feet. So there's a lot of work that has to get done in the spring. As you can imagine, grass cutting season is now here, so they're fully operational as of last week, actually. As far as our neighbor to neighbor program, we sent out another notice last week just to try to reinvigorate those folks out in the community, try to cast another net to see who still needed assistance. And that yielded some benefits. We actually sent follow-up notices to both school superintendents, and we have seen some families actually have reached out to us in the past 7 days seeking assistance. So to date, we've had about 6 residents who requested grocery shopping because they didn't feel safe to go out in the community on their own. 3 residents have requested financial assistance. We've given out a bunch of $100 Walmart gift cards to people in need through the Bloomer Girls. They've done a great job in supporting that effort. And then most recently, Matt from our library director, he's reached out to approximately 1,300 of his patrons and has let them know that the Neighbor to Neighbor program is available, and just checking in on them, seeing if those patrons need any assistance, and that the Neighbor to Neighbor program was there. And that didn't yield as much need, but I saw personally at least a half a dozen, if not more, emails just thanking all of the community partners for the work that they were doing to provide assistance to those that were in need. In all of this, I would say we probably have received more offers to assist us and to provide donations than we have individuals seeking assistance. So it really speaks to the people that live in this community that they're all willing to help out with when and where they can. So again, we'll continue to keep you posted on the Neighbor to Neighbor program, but again, it's doing all that it can to try to help those that are in need. And lastly, I just wanted to talk a little bit about, and I already mentioned some of the stats that the governor is tracking and potential reopening in the next, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks potentially. So I'm working with all the departments right now. We're not waiting for the governor to tell us that we can reopen to start to put plans in place. We're thinking about what do we need now to start to reopen. Anything from plexiglass at some of our customer service windows to cloth face coverings for all our employees, so on and so forth. So all of the different departments are actively looking at their operations and thinking about what they need so that they can reopen their doors. You know, as you can imagine, there's going to be some departments that'll be a little bit more challenging, like our senior center, given the population that they serve. But again, reaching back to some of our state affiliates and trying to get some best practice recommendations from them. So the goal is to be fully functional when the governor allows us to reopen. I will, pending any questions, I'll start from there.
I was just going to say that's an amazing fact that more people have contacted, more residents have contacted wanting to offer their help and donate their time and or services or food supplies to help others than what we've actually had for people in need. That's amazing, really.
Yeah, it's great work.
Great community.
And Janice has done really a great job, trying to, she's been the quarterback of that whole program, and it's everything from taking in the requests, trying to vet those requests and connect those individuals to the services that they need. So a lot of work to Janice and her team, and circling back to all of our community partners. So again, it's a complete team effort, and she's done a great job.
She has an awesome job.
Yep. Derek, getting back to what you were saying about, it's something I had asked earlier and something you were just mentioned regarding Lieutenant Governor Polito's speech. Are any communities doing more? Are they planning on doing hand counts or electronic voting, or is everybody still going to cling to the notion of just a voice vote?
I don't know that. I can certainly ask that question to the listserv that I'm associated with, mostly Central Mass town manager group. So I don't know. Nobody's asked that question at all at this point. So again, I can find that out. But I can say that in that legislation that I talked about earlier about allowing town meeting go down to 10% of their quorum, it also allows for electronic voting. It's only for not electronic voting, virtual voting for representative town meeting. So representative town meetings like Plymouth and Shrewsbury, for example, they can actually hold their town meeting virtually. They don't have to do it in present.
Because I noticed a question that had popped up in the chat box here with the question is to the chair, can the electronic voting committee revisit, look into a system? But if there's no, if the state isn't leaning in that direction and the board isn't leaning in that direction, or I guess I forgot to ask Maureen or Brett. I see Brett shaking no. Maureen, I'm assuming no. Okay. All righty. Any other questions for Derek regarding his manager's report? All right. New business. Does anybody have anything for new business?
Nobody can get out to get any new business. Just saying.
There's nothing we would love more than some new business.
I know.
That's right.
You're right, Brett.
Same old business.
Yep.
All right. So nothing on the new business.
Nope.
All right. We got look ahead topics. These have been, obviously, we really haven't been able to address any of these given the function of the town and, of course, our meetings. But
Right.
discussion of annual town meeting, Upton neighbor-to-neighbor town hall use policy, discussion of fire and EMS advisory, senior tax relief, discuss a letter of intent for all boards meetings, cemetery commissioners, police sergeant pinning ceremony, and I think that's it. Is there any public comment at this point in time? Do we have anybody? I don't see anything in the chat box. Kelly, do you have anything?
Nope. No, anything that was in the chat box has been addressed.
Okay. All right. I will, do either of my colleagues have any other further comments that they'd like to make? Otherwise, I will take a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second Maureen Dronell.
And make that unanimous action, Stephen Metellian.